The hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, and the Prophet prophesied that the river Euphrates will uncover a mountain of gold. A mountain of gold will emerge from beneath the river. A mountain of the metal gold will come out from underneath the river. People will fight for that gold. 99 out of every 100 who fight for that gold will be killed. In that war, 99% of all combatants will be killed. That is the Great War. Never in human history has there been a war where 99% of combatants were killed. Never. That is the Great War. But each will say, I will be the one who will survive. When the war is fought, no one is certain of the outcome, but believers must not touch that gold. We can accept this literally, waiting for a mountain of metal to emerge from underneath the river. Only when that mountain of metal gold comes out of the river will the Great War take place. No malhama, until the mountain of metal appears. Until then, we can go home, eat biryani, and sleep. But there's another way to understand this as something that needs to be interpreted. We offered an interpretation years ago, blessed with studies in international economics and monetary economics. When I entered the classroom, I went in with the Quran. Oh yes, the Quran was here and here. That is why the teacher said, I don't want you in my class. This was Geneva, a PhD student. Professor Kursan said, Mr. Hosein, you don't have to come to my class. I was creating too many problems. I had to stop attending his class, write the exam, and I passed. Alhamdulillah. Because of that knowledge, Allah blessed me. I was able to interpret that in 1974. The prophecy was fulfilled when an ocean of oil underneath the river began to function as a mountain of gold. When the petrodollar was born, Saudi Arabia agreed to sell oil for only US dollars. Nothing else. You cannot buy oil without US dollars. So the US dollar became an ocean of oil underneath the river began to function as the mountain of gold. This is my interpretation. Since I gave this interpretation, no one has challenged it so far. No. But Allah knows best. Only Allah can confirm that an interpretation is correct. So when will the Great War take place? Answer: when they begin to fight for the mountain of gold, which is the petrodollar monetary system. Has the challenge to the petrodollar monetary system started yet? Of course, we were eating our biryani. Russia led the way with BRICS. Russia, China, India, South Africa, and Brazil. BRICS to offer an alternative. Another monetary system. An alternative to the petrodollar system. And they are making headway. Yes, China, for example, has now offered to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has to be careful because China is the biggest customer now for Saudi oil. We will pay for your oil with Chinese yuan and will offer to redeem the yuan for gold. China is not in conflict with the international monetary system, which has banned the use of gold as money. But China is bypassing the petrol law. This is an indication that the system is heating up. For a challenge to the mountain of gold, eventually it could lead to the collapse of the US dollar. When there is the possibility of collapse of the US dollar, of course, that could lead to the Great War. And when the Great War takes place, then 99 out of every 100 will be killed. We now turn to an analysis of what kind of war will it be. It has to be a war with weapons of mass destruction. It cannot be conventional warfare. Only a war fought with weapons of mass destruction like nuclear weapons and thermonuclear weapons and other weapons we don't know of can achieve the result of 99% killed. Why do they need such a war? Why do they need the Malhama? This is not within the scope of our lecture, but the lecture cannot be complete unless we touch on it. It is only Islamic. Let me repeat one more time. Not political science, not economics, not monetary economics, not the historian who can fully explain the phenomena of a great war coming, only eschatology. And we are able to offer an explanation based on a verse of the Quran in Surah Salad, which is the last surah I'll be quoting before I end, in which Allah warns. He says, proceed to a shadow which will come over the world, and that shadow will have 3 parts. It will manifest itself in 3 stages. In order for there to be a shadow, it has to be the shadow of something. So what is the reality behind this shadow, which will appear in 3 parts? The Prophet said Saham, that when the Dajjal is released, he will live on earth for 40 days. This is a hadith of Muslim, and you will find an analysis of this. Hadith both in my book Surah, in the Mo'aj, and my book Jerusalem and the Quran. He will live on earth for 40 days, one day which will be like a year, one day which will be like a month, which would be like a week, and all his days, meaning all the rest of his days, like our days. So Dajjal, when he enters into this world, when he's released from his chains, will be in a shadow. He will cast a shadow on the world. You will not be able to see him. You'll only see the shadow, and the shadow will have 3 parts before the shadow ends, and the Dajjal will appear himself in person. After the conquest of Constantinople, the shadow goes in. I am offering an interpretation of the Quran. I have the right to do so, but I must always say, Allah knows best, because only He can confirm. And so we say the shadow are the 3 parts of the mission of the D.O. before he appears in human form. And in the first stage, we said in that first located within that first stage in his mission, who he wants to rule the world from Jerusalem, he creates a ruling state in the first stage. And that's Britain. That's Britain. And so we are able to explain the phenomenon of Pax Britannica. Because of our eschatology, we ask the political scientist, can you explain it? No, we cannot. The whole of Columbia University, they cannot explain it. We say, this is the first stage. And then in the second stage, we said it's Pax Americana, where one ruling state is replaced by another. United States has this manifest destiny of ruling the world. And then the second ruling state is replaced with the third one. And we say, that's Jerusalem. That's Israel. And that's Pax Judea. But then we notice that Pax Britannica could not come into being without great wars of imperialism, conquest, the East India Company taking a foothold until eventually Britain ruled over India. And then we noticed that the transition from Pax Britannica to Pax Americana led to 2 great wars, the First World War and the Second World War. And so we conclude now that the transition from Pax Americana to Pax Judaica cannot take place without a great war. And so our conclusion that the great war is going to take place in order to effect the transition from Pax Americana to Pax Judaica.